we used in the book, again, the template of Stoughton's life, which was a life in struggle for 40 or 50 years. Stoughton is now 80 years old. He was first arrested in 1945, so it's a long, long history of dissidency. So, yeah, so the book is filled with these stories. That begins with Stoughton's mother, and then they unfold onwards. And, you know, it's a... I think in that sense, it's a really interesting book, and it's a really valuable thing to read. So, feminist thread, I think, goes from the very beginning until the very end. And the relationship between Stoughton Lynde and Alice Lynde is also something that I always admired. You know, that's, they always call themselves community of two. Tom Hayden recently, in the foreword to their memoirs, which are coming out, called them community of two, the most inspiring thing he ever encountered in his life. You know, people like this, people like Stoughton, this is, and Michael just mentioned Noam. I mean, there are people out there who are really, really, really amazing, and we have so much to learn from them. And, you know, when I think about our movements, and when I study 1960s and read about 1960s, about all different debates and so on, we haven't resolved almost any of them. Spontaneity versus organization, reform versus revolution, all of those things that people are talking in the 60s, they're not, I mean, we haven't resolved them. There is a definite deficit of conversation between us and our mentors. And we need to talk. Michael here wrote a beautiful memoir called Remembering Tomorrow. I mean, there needs to be also an effort from an older generation in doing this. But there needs to be a communication, a circulation of information. We need really to think and rethink about all of these things. And we are not doing enough of effort, I think, in that sense. Should we do one more? 1, 2, 3. No. Thomas.
Maybe I'm not...
It's not about political economy.
No, not at all, actually. Maybe a little jazz at the end, but that's it. Nah. One question I have is, does the idea of accompaniment necessarily means like going outside and finding someone else? Because a lot of times I think it can neglect looking at ways people struggle in their own lives. You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess I just... You know, I wash dishes for a living. I struggle every day to get through service, washing a million of them. And through that, we're all working together to get through that, you know, in the restaurant. And so I guess a comment I would make, I think the power, what I really liked in your message, though, is the idea of shared practice and having that as the basis of solidarity. Sure. But I think there might be another interesting thing to emphasize, too, and it's actually like more of a maybe a musical analogy, and I think it applies very much to, say, the left-wing academia that you critique so much. I think most people, there's a serious tendency on the left for everyone to try to play lead guitar or saxophone. I'm not sure if anyone else is a musician, right? They want to be like at the front of the band, but the idea of accompaniment in music, right? It's very supportive. Like, I play bass also, so it's like supporting and that forming shared practice out of that might be another useful way to formulate that idea that could also ground it in the real lived experience, because many people, rather than, because if it just assumes that these people aren't struggling and they need to go find people who are struggling and accompany them, that's targeted to a very specific audience.
I know, I think you're right. I mean, there is a thing about accompaniment that I probably failed to mention. It relates to our constituency of the anarchist movement, which I find to be mostly middle class. Okay, or I would use the term coordinator class, but in any case, not working class. And there, of course, there are people even here who are workers, people who actually are working and struggling in their workplaces, organizing in their workplaces. But most of the anarchists do come from, they're either students or dropouts or, people who are coming, and I'm not condemning that. I'm just saying that this particular constituency would do better if we are going to create a movement to go and actually do an organizing work and learn how to relate. Maybe I disagree with Michael a little bit there, because you mentioned Noam, Noam is in that sense an anomaly. I think that we can all learn how to relate to ordinary people. And what does that horrible phrase, ordinary people, even mean? I mean, how to learn how to relate to people other than ourselves. And I think this is really not something that requires special skills. You know? So in that sense, yeah, I think that you're right.
Sure.
Should we do one more? 1, 2, 3, okay. Thank you so much for coming.